Welcome back to the Extra Rep Podcast, guys. I'm Josh.
I'm Liam.
Today, we're going to talk about things that are killing your gains. So if you're trying to obviously build muscle, get stronger, look leaner, these are the things that you need to avoid, or the things that are stopping you from getting there. So we're going to go through a few of these, and we'll go through a few things as well that you should be working towards or doing at the end as well. But I think the best place to start, Liam, is a lot of people will say, and look, a lot of people know this, but they probably still don't consume enough or as consistently as they should, and that is protein.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Unless you're tracking it, you don't know. Or at least tracking it for a short period of time. It's the one macronutrient we all under-evaluate.
I think especially at breakfast time seems to be the time where a lot of people just think like, for example, like all the cereals now have a high protein version, and it's like, if you're doing a serve, which is maybe like 50 grams, whatever it is, it's like you're barely getting 10 grams of protein.
Yeah.
Like,
and there's still 30 grams of carbs.
Yeah, they can market it as well. And of course it depends on your carb intake as well, which we'll talk about as well. But yeah, it's really, really imperative, guys, especially if your body hasn't had protein for, 8 to 12 hours potentially. Really, really essential to get it in terms of, I guess, like structuring it and maximizing it for as many gains as possible. A lot of people say, between 4 to 6 meals, probably 0.3 to 0.5 grams per kilo of body weight. And then people recommend potentially a slightly larger dosage before bed, obviously to offset that obviously 8 hours of not having any protein at all. So there is a little bit more in the system. I know like a few of the bodybuilders used to do like, they'd talk a bit more about digestion. So it would be like, they actually wouldn't have like chicken as their last meal. They would make sure they had beef because it took longer to break down and digest, and that way they had the amino acids in their system for longer. So It is funny when there's success leaves clues with these sort of things. And there is actually like a lot of bro science, but a lot of stuff is actually quite useful when you think about these kind of things too.
Well, here's the thing, right? Beef is harder to digest than white meat.
Exactly. So
what if you were having digestive issues and you ate beef, and then that digestive issues is struggling to digest it, raised your heart rate, and then you were struggling to sleep? There's always arguments to everything, right? But yes, total daily protein intake at the end of the day is the most important. And does it have to be 4 to 6 meals? No. Do we have muscle protein synthesis in certain feeding windows? Yes. Is there an anabolic window? Yes and no, depending on when you had your last serving of protein, if you're training fasted or not, if you had carbohydrates in your system because they're protein sparing. So there's a whole bunch of rabbit holes you can go down, but I say just my rule of thumb for people is 1.6 to 1.8 grams per kilo body weight, and you should be all good there. If you're hardcore dieting and you're someone like me and you like to be really strict when you're dieting and just go in hard and fast and then get out of a deficit, I'd say 2 grams of protein to 2.2, just from a pure satiation standpoint and less risk of muscle loss. But we're talking about muscle gain here.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'll tend to, especially when I diet, like I don't change my protein too much, but mine normally sits about 3 grams per kilo. But that's just because I enjoy protein and I know that it satiates me more, especially when I'm dieting and things like that. But yeah, I enjoy having my meals with protein and then adding stuff to it. Whereas a lot of people probably think like, oh shit, how do I build my meal, or how do I add protein to a meal I'm already having? Whereas I've already got like the protein source is there. If you can start with the protein source and build meals around it, it's going to make your life way, way easier when when you're talking about just getting more gains. So I would actually recommend, 1.6 is probably the minimum. Like I recommend for most of my clients, I just say a baseline 2, but I'll say if you're hungrier, like work your way up to 3 even. But again, depends on the person, depends on the individual. But if you could say, like, let's say 4 meals, like say someone's 100 kilos, right? So like if you can get, 200 grams of protein in, 4 meals of 50 grams, like that's going to hold you in really, really good stead. I think that's just a really easy way to look at it.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah. I think the next one we want to really sort of dive into, and I know we talk about this just about on every podcast, don't we? But it is sleep, and it's not sleeping enough. And it's not just because it's like, oh, we think you need to sleep 8 hours so you don't eat or whatnot. It's because it has a direct impact on your hunger, your satiety, your testosterone. I'll probably bring this study up before, but there were people who slept 8 hours, people who slept 5.
Yep.
Same calories, same protein. The people who slept 8 hours after 12 weeks actually gained muscle and lost body fat, whereas in the people sleeping 5 hours actually gained body fat and lost muscle, despite the scale being basically the same across both participants. They both lost the same amount of scale weight, but they both look completely different, which is a massive thing. And it's something that, again, people just can't seem to get their head around, I find.
Yeah, it's a hard one. And one thing you didn't mention there, but sleep's also a precursor to growth hormone as well. So if you're looking at specifically growing muscle, remember, it always comes from the stimulus first. The training is the most important for growing muscle. Like, there is research coming out that you can be sleep deprived, and as long as you get the right stimulus, you can still grow muscle. Are we saying that's what you should do? No, it actually makes it way harder. Synergistically, training and sleep go hand in hand. The harder you train, the harder you should sleep, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. And that's, it goes back to, obviously we know there's, with these things killing your gains, there's going to be things that obviously you're going to have to almost bring all these things together and be like, okay, stop doing these or start improving these, because these are the things that obviously by probably taking the lowest hanging fruit and say, okay, what's the one thing that I'm really struggling with? Out of this list, start improving that. Then you can start working on the other things.
Yep.
And you will find as a result, the other things should start probably slowly improving as well. But it's just starting with one thing, making the decision to really change that, really improve that. And then you can start adding on other things as well. But back to sleep, 7 to 9 hours, quality sleep. Obviously, if you're on night shifts or shift work, it's a little bit different, but it's still just trying to maximize as much as you can, because again, you're trying to get everything you can out of your muscle growth, and it is generally a slow process. So, if you can get another 10% every night, because you're sleeping, think how much that could potentially add up over, weeks, months, and years.
Yeah.
Sweet. We'll talk, I reckon, training wise. It's probably one thing that I see a lot of people do, because they'll go on TikTok, they'll go on Instagram. My favorite influencer, who's clearly on steroids, by the way, has said this exercise is a 10 out of 10 for growing my chest. So I was doing well on bench, but now I'm going to change that and I'm going to go to a plate press, or I'm going to go to this funky setup with an ascending resistance profile and bands and all this quirky shit. Yeah. And we're not saying that exercise is necessarily bad. What we're saying is you haven't stuck with your routine for long enough to actually squeeze the juice out of the lemon to get every inch out of that program before you start adapting to a different program and a different stimulus.
Yeah. Did you see on my story yesterday what I posted?
Yeah.
I posted an example of my personal training program, and I was doing a seated mechanical shoulder press, and my first working set from week 1 was 79 kilos for a working set of 7, and then another working set of about 6.5 to almost 7. The last rep was a struggle. We're now on week 15, and I just hit 93 kilos for 2 sets of 7. And to get that 14 kilo difference in strength took, 15 weeks. But I persisted, and you get stronger. There was no reason to change. I was still seeing the progress every single week. Yes, it's minuscule progress, but it's still progress.
And that's what people, they will be like, okay, maybe if they are hitting a plateau, I think the problem a lot of the time, and sometimes it is the training program, don't get me wrong, they're just doing too much volume, but a lot of the time it's those other things that we've potentially talked about. It's the sleep, it's the stress, it's not looking after yourself, it's not fueling your nutrition beforehand, it's the alcohol, the nights out, it's all these things that are leading you to not be able to make progress in the gym that you should be making, and that in turn should obviously be getting you gains, improving your body composition, and building you more muscle. So just be really wary of changing your workouts too often. A lot of my clients have been on programs, like I said, for months, similar to Liam. The only time I would change a program is normally when people are just they're bored, they need a new stimulus, and that's completely fine if you're someone who gets bored. But I would say for a minimum, absolute minimum of 4 weeks, it has to be a minimum of 4 to 6. I think to see, at least some differences, but going all the way from, 8, 12 and beyond, if you're looking at serious results, provided you can progress every single time.
Definitely. And just to touch on the excessive volume, I had a consult with a guy named Nick who got sent to me last night, and we were talking about his programming, and he was mentioning he trains at Derrimut, and there's these dudes with really big legs, and he's always had skinny legs and stuff. I'm like, all right, so what are you doing? And he's like, and he sounded really strong from the numbers he was telling me. I do 7 sets of squats. I do 100 kilos for sets of 12, and then I sort of like lower the weight and just go to failure and get like ends up doing 60 kilos to failure. And I'm like, so he's got one working set, and then he's got his second working set, which we know has decreased from there. And then he's just doing 5 excessive sets of volume, and one of them's to failure on them. And I'm like, holy shit, like, no wonder your legs aren't growing.
Yeah.
Like the amount of damage and muscle fatigue, it would take literally probably 5 to 6 days to recover from that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really hard because, it depends on the person, again, genetics wise and things like that. Some people can recover a bit quicker and they can potentially get away with more, right? But the problem is a lot of the stuff that, probably you guys listening have been sort of, spouted through social media are coming from a lot of people who are probably on anabolic steroids, probably on this stuff. And they can, or just genetic freaks, right? Who are just genetic freaks, top 1% of the barrel. You see some people from high school, for example, it's like they were just big when they were 13. Like they didn't even lift the weight. And then they got in the gym for 6 months. All of a sudden, they're one of the biggest people in the gym. And you're like, how? And it's like they're literally just a 0.0001% genetic freak. Like they just build muscle at a ridiculous rate. And there was a study done actually with bicep curls. And they did different groups of people. And the results were crazy. Like it was like people would progress, right? But some people would like barely grow. Like there'd be a middle ground of like, decent progression for most people. But there were some outliers. Some people's biceps would like triple in 12 weeks and some would like just barely half an inch. So, unfortunately your genetics do play a big part, but that doesn't mean you can't make progress for yourself.
Definitely not. I mean, look, there are teenagers out there that look better than me, and I've been lifting for 11 years, and like they've barely touched the weights as well.
Yeah.
Some of them haven't even touched weights. They just play footy or something like that, and just their body just naturally grew. Like this is how important and crazy genetics are. But this is why it's also very dangerous, because someone could get results by doing something completely wrong. Yeah. And then they'll be like, well, I got these results, so I'm just now going to go online and just tell everyone about it.
And people are different. Exactly. Everyone's different. Coaching's different. But you've got to treat someone as an individual, and you've got to treat yourself listening as an individual. Some things will work for you, some things won't. And it's up to you to start, deciphering that and finding, what works for you. And even the stuff that we've talked about, there's going to be stuff that's probably going to be more effective for you than other stuff we've talked about as well.
Yeah.
And like I said, unless we know you personally or you book in for a consult, we're not going to be able to, tell you exactly what you need to do first, etc. But I think going to cardio again, I think that is one place where people, again, it is definitely a good thing to have a healthy cardiovascular system.
Definitely.
But a lot of people will overdo it, especially when it comes to, I want to grow muscle, but I also want to, be able to run 10K, or I want to, get into that.
High rocks.
Yeah, everyone's favorite. High rocks. Yeah.
Look, there's nothing wrong with being it's a hybrid athlete now. That's the new term.
There's shit runner, average lifter.
Yeah, yeah. But look, it's like always just understand yourself. Like for me, like if I want to be a hybrid, I need to be a swimmer or on the Stairmaster. If I run 3 times a week, my legs are just so fatigued and my knees just go to shit. And it affects my performance in the gym. Or I can get really strong in the gym and I can do steady state cardio and I'm completely fine. So it works differently for everyone. But I will say, you do really need a healthy cardiovascular system, because when you get to a point where you've built a certain amount of strength, that your cardiovascular system becomes your limiting factor rather than your motor unit recruitment and your actual muscle size. So for example, if you do a working set on a back squat, it's very cardiovascularly demanding. And a lot of people, because they notice their heart rate skyrockets, it's like, what really failed there? Was it your quads? Was it your hamstrings? Was it your glutes? Was it your diaphragm? Or was it your breathing? And then sometimes you're like, I couldn't catch my breath. Like I just didn't have another rep in me. When they knew that, say, like if they're on something stable like the hack squat or anything like that, they could have gone purely to failure because, their legs weren't as taxed as their cardiovascular system.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because a lot of people will, demonize machines sometimes, be like, oh, just squat, and like these sort of things, that's what they're there for. Like if you can centralize, target tissue, say it's your quads on a hack squat, right? If you can really centralize that and you have some assistance from the back pad that's enabling you to get the most out of them, really take them close to failure, which you potentially wouldn't be able to do on a barbell squat, It's just one of those things where, you know, that's what it's there for. And that's when it just comes down to, you know, smart programming and smart coaching and knowing, you know, when to put things, why to put things. And that is another podcast in itself. That's a whole different rabbit hole. But going back to that main thing, don't change your workouts too often. Like, if you actually do things properly, you should be able to do a couple of sets. You should be able to progress those sets every single time you come into the gym, and you should still start seeing some results from it as well.
And get a professional to look at your program. Honestly, I just say it out right now because it still baffles me what I see people are doing in the gym, and then also the programming that they're on, and they wonder why they're not getting results. And majority of the time, it's due to lack of intensity, even though because they're doing so much volume, they feel like they're training hard, but it's lack of intensity and too much excessive volume and muscle damage and fatigue. They're the two I see hand in hand, and probably not tracking if you don't track your weights.
I think a good test for people, say if you're someone who's not sure where your intensity lies at the moment in the gym, next time you come to the gym, maybe tomorrow or whatever, next day, pick something that, you know, you might be doing 3 sets of, you know, 80 kilos on the hack squat, right? All I want you to do is do a couple of warm-ups. That first set, I want you to just do as many reps as you physically can. And if you can get like 13, 14, 15 reps, then those other 2 sets that you've done are pretty much almost not irrelevant, but in terms of actually getting the most out of the muscle, if you can hit, you know, potentially 2 sets at like 13 and 12, and they're really difficult sets, maybe you've got 1 rep left if you had someone help assist you or something like that, that's where the magic is, you know, that's where the gains are. And that is potentially, if you're not putting yourself in those uncomfortable situations, is the reason you're not growing at the rate you want to grow.
I'm trying to phrase this as simple as possible for people because they really need to understand this, because it's baffling, right? Because the first working set is the most stimulating, but people get confused because it's technically their 3rd or 4th set because they've had multiple warm-up sets. It's like, yes, you should warm up at like half that weight and then slowly build up, but it's your 1 working set where you've gone all out. Then your 2nd set has reduced the stimulus by about half, but you can still make gains. After that, it's honestly just diminishing returns.
Yeah, and again, it goes down to different exercises, different programming and things like that as well. But again, like, we wouldn't recommend 6 chest exercises. There's just no need.
Drop sets or anything.
Yeah, there's just
like
no need for 6 different ones. Like, if you can get away with 1 or 2 different exercises, or maybe, you know, like to say 3 or 4 spread across a week, for a muscle group, you know, maybe doing 6 to 10 sets or something like that, you know, across each muscle group. I think that is the place to start. And then if you feel like you can still progress more, that's when you can start slowly adding an extra set or doing something slightly different. And that's going to give you much more. You've just got to take a step back, go, am I doing 4, 5, 6, 7 sets?
Yeah.
Go back to 2, work them really bloody hard, do that for 4 to 8 weeks, and I guarantee you're going to see better returns on your investment, your time in the gym for sure.
And one other thing that's killing your gains is you're only hitting your muscles once per week. I think that's a huge one. Like, people don't realize your muscles actually are either growing or they're atrophying. And atrophying, that's the right word. So when your muscles atrophy, you can train them again. So if I'm trying to hammer this home because I don't want to fuck it up. I want it to be as crystal clear for people to understand. Within 48 hours, your muscle should have recovered so you can hit it again. So that means, for example, like my programming on full body, if I'm training Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that's hitting a 3 times frequency. I can hit my muscle groups 3 times per week, and it can get a huge stimulus. Rather than if you just train chest on Mondays and you don't train chest again until next Monday, then you're only hitting it 1 time a week. And look, if you're doing your 6 sets of chest on the 1 Monday, you may need a whole week because you've done so much like excessive muscle damage and fatigue, but it doesn't actually result in gains.
Yeah. Like if you split that 6 sets you were just talking about onto 2 sets of chest Monday, 2 sets Wednesday, 2 sets Friday, you're going to be able to push those with greater intensity. You're going to be able to recover between the sessions and you're going to get a better output out of it. Of course, comes down to smart programming and how you do that is going to be different for everyone. And then it comes down to personal preference as well, right? Like with my coach, for example, like we went to a full body approach and it just got to a point where I was just like, we're doing supersets and we'll fix you up some injuries and things like that as well.
Yeah.
But it just got to the point mentally for me where I was like, I feel like I just need a session where it's like more upper lower. It doesn't need to be just a body part, but I was like, I feel like I need 3 uppers, 2 lowers. I need to really focus on my lower days.
Yep.
You know, I can't go from like an upper to like, oh, now stabilize your pelvis
Yep.
here, and it just stuck with me. So there is going to be enjoyment, and the perfect sort of balance between like this may be the perfect program and this may get you 100% out of everything, but that might not be perfect for you as well. But you want to obviously get as close as you can to that whilst getting into the gym, whilst enjoying it, and whilst being able to push your sets hard, because those are the main things that matter.
So I'll touch on this point because I heard it yesterday, so it's very relevant. You know of Peter Attia?
No.
No? He'd made the Outlive podcast. He was the doctor on Limitless. He's partnered with like Andrew Huberman, runs like podcasts and everything.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So he was on the Stephen Bartlett podcast, and they're talking about health and hypertrophy, and then his weight training session, because it's all about like centuring. He wants to live to 100 and stuff. So he was going through his training program.
This is the vampire, yeah?
No, that's Brian Johnson.
Oh, Brian Johnson, sorry.
But one thing he was specifically mentioned was he was just like, because they touched on genetics and how big he can get and stuff. And then he's just like, he's like, I'm just not someone that grows. Like, he's like, I've been lifting weights my whole life, can't grow. But then he actually explained his training program. And I was like, no wonder you're not growing, bro. So he's just like, so I do just 4 exercises of chest Monday. And then like he'll do like a typical bro split. Like he'll only train once per week each muscle group. And it's like, if he actually just spread it apart and had more intensity, and now look, his reasoning might not be to grow muscle, like he wants to probably just be strong and stuff, but he had that belief that he mentioned he just can't grow and he's just never going to be big and stuff, but he's not actually training for that at the same time. So it was reflective in his program. So I was like, okay, is this a genetic thing? Is this a lack of understanding of programming? And it's not a knock on him or anything like that, but it's just, I hammer at home of how important the programming is.
Yeah.
Because this is a guy, he understands training intensity and blood flow restriction training, as mentioned all before, but if he just focused on doing less volume, more intensity in his sets, and splitting up his volume across the week and hitting it at a more frequency, he would see better gains.
Yeah, for sure. Quick note on that, blood flow restriction training, don't do it unless you actually have a significant injury and you can't lift heavy.
Look, around injuries and retaining muscle mass, because we did talk about muscles atrophying, like if you've had surgery or if you've got an injury and you don't want that muscle to completely atrophy when you're taking all that time off. Like, I understand. I've got a photo of me when I hadn't lifted in 4 months, and I still hate looking at that photo. Like, you literally see my whole body shrink, like my muscles just gone. It just looks like flab. It's a very strange thing. But the second you get back into training, yes, blood flow restriction training can be really good, but always do it with a professional and have someone monitoring you, because it's not something that you just buy the cuffs off Amazon and then you just start pumping. It can be dangerous. You could have a blood clotting disorder that you're unaware of. You could have had a bit of a shit diet and one of your arteries has a bit of plaque in it. Like, always be cautious with this stuff. Like, you could have high blood pressure and it causes too much hypertension. Like, there's so many different things. It's like, yes, these are tools to be used, but always do them safely and professionally, if that's a word. Yeah, professionally, yeah. Well, with a professional. Like, do it professionally, yeah.
I think the last thing to talk about, and we have talked about it previously, but it is stress. And we know it is a big inhibitor of killing your gains. Obviously, we know when we're stressed, it is going to be a lot harder to build muscle. And I want to just quickly point out before we finish up that stress can be a good thing as well. The problem is there's stress from, training. And there's also stress from life. So, wife, kids, job, money, etc. I like to use the analogy of like a stress bucket. So what we need to do is we need to fill up this bucket full of stress, right? But we can't overflow the bucket. So we need a good, amount of training intensity in there that's going to fill up that bucket, not to the brim, but close. And then we want those lifestyle factors to come in there and fill that up even more, but we don't want to be tipping over. As soon as we get to the point of tipping over, that's when we're going to be under recovered. And even if, sleep and stress are quite good, if sleep and nutrition are quite good, that stress is still going to, chronic stress getting to that point is going to unfortunately lead you down a bad road, and it's just going to inhibit your ability and potential to build muscle.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the principles of building muscle and hypertrophy, it's like you need to recruit motor units, you need mechanical tension, all that stuff. And if you're too stressed, then performance goes in the gutter. So it inhibits those two things. It inhibits your muscle from experiencing mechanical tension because your body doesn't want to be under more stress. It inhibits the motor unit recruitment because your body is like, you're, so stressed to the point where it's like, we don't want you to push a PB. You're too fatigued. Your central nervous system's too fatigued.
Yeah.
And look, we have two different nervous systems of sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic's like when cortisol's up, we actually want to be in that stress state. And that's when we're doing things like training. But parasympathetics, when we're doing things like sleeping and eating. And if you're more in your sympathetic dominant, then that'll affect your digestion. It'll affect your stomach acid production. It'll affect like your nutrient absorption. It may affect your sleep because it might take you longer to get to sleep. You might wake up during the night with a racing mind. Like there's so many different things, but stress correlates into all of them. And that's why, it can kill your gains.
Yeah, even sleep, like going back to parasympathetic nervous system, that's why, again, nasal strips, like I mentioned on the last podcast, promote parasympathetic breathing. And I've noticed a big difference in obviously stress, but also sleep quality by doing them as well. But I think to summarize, guys, it's going to sound really simple when we summarize it because it's eat enough protein, sleep well, do your workouts for a couple of months, see small progressions every single week. Obviously, make sure that your cardiovascular system is at a baseline level without overdoing it, and then reduce your stress levels. And you're going to make
5 golden rules.
You're going to make the best progress you can possibly make for your genetics at that time. Again, if you guys have any other questions, guys, myself, Action Fitness Nutrition on Instagram, Liam, Coach Liam C. Murphy on Instagram, or again, you can message the podcast on Instagram at the Extra Rep Podcast. But until then, guys, we'll see you in the next podcast.
See you guys.